Picture this. Snow falling so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Winds howling at 80 miles per hour, ripping telegraph wires from poles like spider webs. Drifts so high they buried houses to the second floor. This wasn't just a snowstorm. This was the Great White Hurricane. For 3 days in March 1888, New York City vanished under snow. Trains derailed, telegraph lines snapped. People froze to death on sidewalks 3 blocks from home. Over 400 died trying to get through a storm that turned America, his greatest city, into a frozen tomb. And yet somehow New York survived. Not through technology or preparedness, but through sheer stubborn determination to keep moving, even when movement itself became deadly. It began on a Sunday, March 11th, 1888. The day before, temperatures had reached the mid-50s. Spring was arriving early. Crocuses were blooming in Central Park. Women wore light dresses. Men left their overcoats at home. Then Arctic air from Canada collided with warm Gulf air over New York Harbor, and everything changed. Rain started falling around midnight. By 1 a.m. Monday morning, as temperatures plunged to freezing, rain turned to snow. Not gentle snow, not the kind you watch from windows with cocoa. Snow that came sideways, driven by winds that reached hurricane force. By Monday morning, March 12th, New York woke to a world transformed. 10 inches had already fallen. The snow didn't stop. It kept coming, hour after hour, day after day. Wind gusts hit 80 miles per hour, though official reports, conservative, measured only 40 miles per hour sustained. The combination created snowdrifts that defied belief. Drifts averaged 30 to 40 feet, burying entire buildings. The highest drift recorded reached 52 feet in Gravesend, Brooklyn. That's a 5-story building made of snow. The city paralyzed. By 8 a.m. Monday, the city was completely immobilized. The elevated trains, New York's primary transportation, ground to a halt. 1 train derailed, killing passengers and crew. 75 others became stuck or crashed. 183 passengers were stranded on snowy tracks for a day and a half. People who'd left for work that morning had no way to get home. Walking in the streets became not only impossible, but also deadly. Telegraph infrastructure was disabled, isolating New York from Washington, Philadelphia, and Boston. No communication, no news, no way to call for help. The city was an island, cut off from the world by walls of white. Fire stations couldn't respond to calls. Property loss from fire alone reached $25 million. Buildings burned while firefighters stood helpless, unable to reach them through drifts that blocked every street. Horses, the backbone of city transport, couldn't move. They froze where they stood or collapsed from exhaustion, trying to push through snow that reached their chests. 500,000 pounds of manure and 60,000 gallons of horse urine froze into chunks across city streets, creating a sanitation nightmare that wouldn't be cleared for weeks. Death in the drifts of the 200 people who perished in New York City. Most were found buried in snowdrifts along the city's sidewalks. People left work Monday evening, stepped into the blizzard, and never made it home. Bodies weren't discovered until days later, when the snow melted enough to reveal what it had hidden. One victim was Senator Roscoe Conkling, a New York Republican Party kingpin and aspirant for the U.S. presidency. The 59-year-old fell into a snowdrift in Union Square after refusing to pay an exorbitant sum for a cab. Stuck for 20 minutes, Conkling freed himself, but collapsed and died from the effects a month later. If a powerful senator couldn't survive 3 blocks in the snow, what chance did ordinary New Yorkers have? Workers trapped in offices slept at their desks. Only 30 people out of 1,000 were able to make it to the New York Stock Exchange. Wall Street closed for 3 straight days, something that had never happened before. Banks locked their doors. Shops stayed shuttered. The entire economy of America's commercial capital simply stopped. Those walking home were electrocuted when stepping on recently buried power lines. The city's extensive above-ground electrical system, already primitive by later standards, collapsed under the weight of ice and snow. Continued snowfall and blowing snow immediately buried the downed wires. You couldn't see them, you just stepped wrong and died. The human spirit in the storm. But New Yorkers being New Yorkers, Some refused to let a little thing like death by blizzard stop them. Up to 15,000 people were stranded on the elevated trains. Enterprising souls with ladders charged fees to rescue passengers from trains stuck 2 stories above buried streets. Capitalism didn't stop for Snow. Mark Twain, in town at the time, was stranded at his hotel for days. P.T. Barnum, ever the showman, entertained the stranded at Madison Square Garden, turning disaster into spectacle. The East River froze solid, an occurrence so rare that adventurous souls tried walking across. When tides shifted and broke up the ice, these adventurers found themselves stranded on ice floes, requiring rescue by braver souls than themselves. Hotels overflowed with workers who couldn't get home. Bars became shelters. Churches opened their doors. Strangers shared body heat in doorways, waiting for the storm to pass. And through it all, there was a peculiarly New York attitude of stubborn defiance. The storm might kill you, but it wouldn't beat you. When the storm finally passed by March 13th, the storm began to subside. New York City recorded a low of 6 degrees, the coldest so late in the season, a record that still stands. The high that day reached only 12 degrees. The snow stopped, but the aftermath had just begun. 24 million cubic yards of snow had to be removed by hand because snowplows didn't exist in sufficient numbers. Crews worked for days, then weeks, just to clear major arteries. Side streets remained impassable for a month. Drifts across the New York-New Haven rail line took 8 days to clear. Bodies emerged as snow melted. Some had been buried for a week before anyone found them. The final death toll exceeded 400 across the Northeast, with 200 in New York alone. Over 200 ships were either grounded or wrecked, killing at least 100 seamen. The storm had reached far beyond city limits, devastating coastal communities and rural areas with equal brutality. The lessons that changed New York. The Great Blizzard forced New York to confront its vulnerabilities. Following the storm, New York began placing its telegraph and telephone infrastructure underground to prevent their destruction. The deadly elevated rail disaster led to the development of the subway system. Grand Central Depot underwent extensive renovation, eventually becoming Grand Central Terminal, with platforms built underground where snow couldn't reach them. The blizzard revealed that modern cities, for all their technological advancement, remained fragile. One storm could paralyze everything. Communication, transportation, commerce, all of it depended on systems that couldn't withstand nature's fury. The lesson wasn't lost on city planners. Within years, New York began the massive undertaking of burying its infrastructure, creating the underground systems that would define the modern city. The storm that defined a generation. The blizzard's impact was so great that until 1969, survivors met to commemorate the storm's anniversary. For 81 years, people gathered to remember the 3 days when New York disappeared. They told stories of drifts higher than buildings, of walking home through walls of white, of finding bodies when the thaw came. Ask anyone who lived through March 1888, and they'd tell you the same thing. It wasn't the cold that scared them, it was the helplessness. Being trapped in a train 20 feet above a street you couldn't see, watching someone collapse 3 steps ahead and being unable to reach them. Hearing screams in the dark and not knowing if help would come or if the snow would claim another victim. The Great Blizzard of 1888 wasn't just weather. It was a test of everything New York thought it was. A modern city, technologically advanced, prepared for anything. The storm proved otherwise. It showed that nature didn't care about elevated trains or telegraph wires or the mighty New York Stock Exchange. It showed that humans, for all their progress, remained vulnerable to forces beyond their control. And yet, New York survived. Not because of technology or infrastructure or careful planning, but because when the storm finally passed, New Yorkers dug out, pulled bodies from drifts, rebuilt what was broken, and kept moving. Because that's what New York does. The storm could bury the city, but it couldn't kill the spirit that made 400 deaths just another challenge to overcome. The Great White Hurricane had come and gone. New York remained, scarred, wiser, and determined never to be caught unprepared again.